Hi, I'm Tyson Franklin, and welcome to this week's episode of the Podiatry Legends Podcast. The podcast is designed to help you feel, see, and think differently about the podiatry profession. With me today is Natalie Kitchener. Now, Natalie is the co-owner of Feet and Motion in Horsham, West Sussex. Now, this is interesting. Natalie graduated from Brighton University in 2022, which was not that long ago. And she was offered the opportunity to become a co-owner at Feet and Motion just after a few months of being out, which is a unique opportunity. Fortunately, she dove on board with that. And since being involved in May 2023, the business has rapidly grown. Revenue has doubled. There's now 5 staff and expanding to a 3-chair clinic. So Natalie, welcome to the podcast. And I'm so glad you are on here.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very pleased to be here.
It was funny. You recommended somebody else to come on the podcast, which is Jo Shapter, who is going to be on a future podcast as well. So you recommended Jo, and you were saying why Jo inspired you. But then when you told me a little bit about your own story, I went, Natalie, you need to get on here and share your story, because there'll be so many new recent graduates or people who have been out for years who will listen to part of your story and go, my God, if Natalie can do it, it means I can do it.
Well, that's really kind of you. Yeah, Jo was a real inspiration to me. She was in her 3rd year when I was a little firstie student. And she was just someone I could really identify with. We had so much in common. She was like me. She was a mum. She was a mature student. She had a business running at the same time. She had this real drive and determination to do well that I so admired. She commuted a silly distance to get to university. So we had a lot in common. And I just found Jo an inspiration from start to finish. And then she graduated. And when I was in my 3rd year, she came back in to do a talk to us about to graduate, about her business and how she'd set up from scratch. She was really brave. She just drove straight in. And it just made you think that is possible. Not only can you do really well, even though you're not the stereotype student, but you can go on and just take the plunge. And she was doing so well. And I just thought, it can be done.
Like I said, I haven't spoken to Jo yet, but I think the advantage a mature age student has over everybody else is life experience. And you can't teach life experience.
No, you can't. Not at all. Not at all. And actually, I think in a lot of ways, being a mature student did me a lot of favors. Yes, I was the technology dinosaur in the class, but I had found myself a couple of friendly 18-year-olds who could sort me out on that state. And I had the advantage of having worked with a lot of different people, the communication skills that helped me just empathize with patients a bit more and get that rapport going a lot easier than perhaps some of my younger members in the cohort. So there are a lot of advantages to being a mature student.
How old were you?
I was 39 when my first year. So
okay. And that's funny because I remember when I was 18, 19 when I started. And I remember there were a couple of people that were in there. Yeah, I think someone was 38, somebody else was 40. And I remember looking at it thinking, my God, you're almost dead. And as an 18-year-old.
My year was kind of unusual. My year group was actually quite a young year group. And there was only 1 or 2 of us who were mature students, and some of the other mature students were in the early 20s, which to me, approaching 40, wasn't really that mature. But the year group above me was more sort of 50-50 as to younger ones and more mature students like myself. So I think it's a little bit luck of the draw which year group you're in, but it had its advantages for sure.
Yeah, but we had a number of mature age students, and I looked at them thinking, but you guys are so old. What are you doing back here? And I couldn't get my head around it. But every single one of them did really well at uni. And I sit there and go, what's our excuse? We've got no commitments. We have no children. We don't have a mortgage.
Yeah.
Life is pretty easy. And I'd watch these people come to uni all day, go home to a family, have to do all that, live an adult life, and then come back and act like kids with us for a few hours each day. And by the time I'd finished with them, though, I had so much respect for mature age students. And then as I got older, and I became the same age that they were, I realized they weren't that old at all. They were just getting started.
Yeah, and it does feel like that a lot to me, like this whole new career for me, and I'm just getting my feet under the table and getting going. But I did some of my best work at 2 a.m, which was really useful. So,
so what was it that Jo said to you, okay, I'll go back a step. You graduated. Were you looking for a job somewhere where they were looking at someone to buy into a practice, or did that just happen?
Not at all. It just happened. I went straight into private practice. I found a little local practice that would allow me to fit around my family. I didn't really want to do NHS for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons was I couldn't fit around my family. I'm a single mum.
Yeah.
So it had to work being a mum, and the hours that they would allow me to do just wouldn't work. So I went to this private practice and they were much more accommodating. So I did that for nearly 8 months. But prior to applying to university, I'd done some shadowing with some local podiatrists, met Flo Paul, lovely lady. And she got in touch with me one day and said, you know what, I'm thinking of selling my Horsham practice. Would you be interested? And weirdly enough, I had just listened to one of your podcasts, and I can't remember the lady's name. And it was about just seizing the moment and the opportunity. Great podcast. And the idea was just grab the opportunities when they came up. Bit fortuitous, perhaps. So I went to have a chat with Flo. I know, weird coincidence. And she was originally looking just to do a straight sale because she has 2 practices in different areas. And she'd found herself in a position where she didn't feel able to properly commit to either one. And she was getting a little bit frustrated that the Horsham practice wasn't developing in the way that she envisaged. So she decided to sell. And we had lots of chats over the next couple of weeks. And I broached the subject and said, well, would you consider co-ownership with me and a sort of gradual handover?
Yeah.
Because as a brand new graduate, I'd done sole trader before, but I'd never run a limited business, felt it was a bit daunting. And I was a brand new clinician, so I didn't have the depth of expertise that she did. She'd been in the role for 13, 14 years by that stage. And it was just a bit overwhelming. So the idea of having her clinical expertise on hand to lean on if I got stuck, and her business experience, that gave me the bit of the safety net that I needed. And sometimes I look at other businesses that are being advertised for sale, and I just wonder if perhaps that would be a great route for other people to go down. People like me who aren't quite brave enough to take the plunge, perhaps not confident of their clinical skills yet, to go down the co-ownership route, because we're doing a gradual handover over 2 years and it's working beautifully. We're both getting exactly what we wanted out of it, and it's doing really well. Yes.
I think part of it too is you've got to be a match for each other. For example, when I had my business and I just sold the whole thing, but if I wanted to bring in a partner, the partner would have to complement the type of business that I had. So if somebody approached me and said, oh yeah, I'd love to be your partner, and they might be a fantastic podiatrist, but they love diabetes, high risk feet, I'd be going,
not going to work.
Yeah, it's not really going to be a good match. You've got to find that right person that has the interest in the type of business that you have. So as you do that handover, the patients probably won't notice any change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And where Flo envisaged Feet in Motion going when she set it up was in an MSK kind of direction.
Yeah.
And that was where I wanted to develop my career too.
Oh,
so
good.
I love general practice, but that's where I can see my career going, where I want it to go over time. And that's exactly what's happening. Little by little, we're shifting in that direction, and it's working really well. But also on a personal level, we just gel. My weaknesses and her strengths complement each other really well. And on a personal level, we just get on very well. I love her candor, exactly where you stand with Flo. And that works for me beautifully.
Yeah, how old's Flo? Are you allowed to say?
I think Flo is in her early 50s.
Oh, so she's a spring chicken. Years to burn.
She is.
Yeah.
She is.
Yeah, I used to think, I must admit, when I was younger, you see someone in their 50s, I used to go, God, they're old. But now that I'm 58, you sort of go, I feel like I'm just getting started. And sometimes I sit there and I'll talk to people and go, I'm still trying to figure out what it is I want to do.
Yeah. And she actually, in some ways, she reminds me of Jo Shapter. She's got that same sort of drive.
Yeah.
And I really admire that. And that's something I think you want to surround yourself with, especially when you're first starting, is people who have that ambition, that drive, and that passion about it, because it rubs off. There's nothing worse than going into an environment where everyone's totally jaded.
Yeah, I know. But I think it's also one of those things too. It seems to be when you went into podiatry as a mature age student, and we'll get on to why you chose podiatry in a sec.
Yeah.
But obviously you went in, you were looking for some guidance and you found Jo. And then as you got to your 3rd year, then Jo came back and there was your guidance again. Then you've come across Flo. Yeah. And all of a sudden there was that guidance again. So I think it helps that you actually had your eyes and ears open and you were looking. You weren't just going through the motions, going through each year, now I've got to graduate and go find a job. You are actually, I think subconsciously, you're actually searching for the right person.
maybe subconsciously, but also possibly consciously, because I'm a
Yeah.
great believer, that adage about you're the sum of the 5 people you spend most time
Oh,
with.
yes.
I am such a believer in that. And
Oh,
if you
huge.
deliberately surround yourself with people who are where you want to be or going where you want to go, and it will help.
I
Definitely.
definitely think all you gotta do is look in Facebook groups. Have a look at the people on Facebook who you will look at and go, oh, if I had to spend a weekend on a deserted island with them, I'd,
Coconut.
yeah, be a coconut to the head. You'd hope you get hit by a coconut and you get knocked out. But you have a look at those people, you have a look at the ones that they associate with, who their biggest raving fans are, and you go, yep, they'd all annoy me too. And then you have a look at the people that you actually really like spending time with. You have a look at the people that they hang around with, you go, oh yeah, I could hang out with them all day, every day.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And Flo is one of those. She's
That's
got a
good.
lot of go.
So I'm going to go all the way back now to
Mhm.
why you chose podiatry as a 39-year-old.
Yeah, slightly random, that one. Horses, oddly enough, got me into
That
human
was my
podiatry.
guess. That was going to be my first guess.
Yeah. So I did all sorts of jobs in my 20s and early 30s, mostly laboratory-based roles, which never really held my attention for that long. That sort of spark that you have initially with a new idea and a new concept kind of dimmed. But my lifelong passion is horses, and I've been a very keen rider since I was a little girl. And I had a horse with problem feet. Farrier couldn't fix it, couldn't get it right. And I, in desperation, got an equine podiatrist involved. Yes, there is such a thing as an equine
Okay.
podiatrist. And she turned him around. She completely fixed his feet, took a much more holistic view. I was so impressed. I thought, right, I am going to train to do that because I want to be able to look after my horse's feet better. Started doing equine podiatry. But alongside, I had a sole trader business going. I had my family, and there's no bones about it. Horses and young children don't mix, and it's quite a physical job. And I could just see that this wasn't going to fit with my
Both
family going
expensive too.
forward. Yeah, it is.
Which is more
It's not
expensive,
cheap.
children or horses? Because I've
Absolutely.
had children, I know how expensive they are,
Horses.
but I've heard horses are really
Horses.
expensive.
Yeah, hideous. I was there with a client one day and I was looking after his horse's feet. And he rather flippantly waggled his foot at me and jokingly said, "Oh, could you sort mine out with that rasp as well? Because mine are worse than the horses." I thought, podiatry for humans? I wonder if that's a thing. Started researching, started looking, realized, oh, it's not just cutting toenails. There's a
Yeah.
lot more to it than that. And then I went and shadowed a couple of local podiatrists, including Flo,
Yeah.
applied to university and never looked back. So
So
yeah, it's been an
you didn't
awkward.
know there was podiatry for humans.
No, I had some really funny lectures in my
That's
first year where things
hilarious.
kept cropping up that
Yeah.
were in common. I remember one of my really early lectures, one of the lecturers mentioned navicular syndrome. It's like, what? People get that too? Oh, wow.
That is
Did not
hilarious.
appreciate at all. Yeah. They all look at me, my younger students, like I'm a mad as a box of frogs because I keep piping up with, what? People get that?
Yeah, but I suppose you don't know what you don't know.
No. So I'm really
And
good with horses feet, and I ended up sort of falling into human podiatry.
that is really funny.
Yeah.
I've had nobody on the podcast so far who that's how they
Yeah.
got into podiatry. They didn't know podiatry. You can
That's
do that
kind of
on
my
humans, which I think is funny. Okay, so you got into it. You realized pretty much from the beginning you enjoyed it. You knew you wanted to head into more the biomechanics area of podiatry.
Yeah.
Was there anything about podiatry you didn't enjoy?
Wound care.
Oh, yeah. It's
Yeah.
not my
So
thing either.
no, so as part of the university course, we did lots of placements within the NHS, and unfortunately, the NHS being where it is at the moment with the sort of triage system, there's a high proportion of wound care and also DOMS, neither of which float my boat
Yeah,
at
and it's
all.
not that and like I always say to people, and there's nothing wrong with that part of podiatry. I wish I could look at a wound and not just feel sick.
Yeah, and then you got to go eat your lunch. I know. So no, it's not my thing either. And all the lectures that really sparked interest to me when I was at university were the sort of biomechanics, MSK stuff. Wasn't necessarily what I was best at,
Yeah,
but I worked on it really hard because that's where I wanted to go. And over time, probably since I graduated, those skills have just really taken off because I've made such an effort to focus on it.
I think that's important that podiatry covers so many aspects. There's so many parts to
Yeah.
it,
Mm.
but there will usually be one or two things that you really enjoy, and it doesn't necessarily mean you are the best at it, but you really
Right.
enjoy it. And I think when you find those areas, whether it's wound care, whether it's biomechanics, for me, it was making orthotics. I just absolutely loved making orthotics.
Yeah.
If I could have a little lab out the back of my house here, just be making orthotics for people every now and then, I would love it because it was just
Yeah.
fun. I really enjoyed it. So I think everybody needs to find those little aspects of podiatry and dive into it. And whether they turn that into a niche within their business or a niche within their career, like Joseph Frankel, for example, who's been on the podcast. When he was on the podcast, he was right into wound care. So he said
Mm,
that it's not that's what his whole business is about. It's probably about 10% of his work is wound care,
mm,
but it's something he's really gotten known for. And I've seen him speak at different conferences because
yeah.
of that area of podiatry. Like, so I think everybody needs to find their thing that they hope
Yeah.
they see more of every day at work. Doesn't mean they're going to, but
Yeah.
I know it was Ben Pearl said exactly the same thing. It's just
Yeah.
find things that interest you and then do research in that area.
And it will start to naturally build a thing. So when I joined Feet in Motion, it was just very much general practice. But MSK was what I was really interested in. And over time, over the last sort of 18 months, 2 years, little by little, that proportion of the business has just grown and grown. And now we're getting a bit of a reputation for it, which is fantastic. I was really lucky actually because I discovered Nick Knight's podcast via Podiatry Legends.
Yeah.
Totally saved my bacon on a lot of MSK. I learned a
Nick's
huge
great.
amount from his podcasts and his NK Active Lunch Club as well.
Yeah, like he's a really nice guy. He knows what parts of podiatry he likes. He's great at sharing that information and he never
Yeah.
makes you feel stupid.
No, not at
Never.
all. And he breaks it
Never.
down in a way that just you could absolutely replicate in an appointment, just
Yeah.
such a logical way. So yeah, thanks, Nick. Huge help.
Yeah, thank you, Nick, for coming on. He's been on here a couple of times as well. So, but what's really interesting though is the business that you became, a part owner in, Feet and Motion, sounds
Mhm.
biomechanical. It sounds like it's
Yeah,
an
it was
MSK
always the
business.
plan. Yeah.
So it was always on the cards. That's where it was going to go.
Yeah, that's where Flo absolutely intended it to go in that sort of direction. But as I say, because she was spread a bit too thin between her
Yeah.
two businesses, she just couldn't develop it in the way that she wanted to, was getting really frustrated by that. And yeah, that was the decision she made that, rather than not do well with either business, let's focus on her other sister practice in Linfield and move on with someone else with Feet in Motion.
It's a common problem. I've got a lot of coaching clients that I've worked with. In their head, they had an image of what it was going to look like,
Yep.
but it went down a different path. And all of a sudden, they're seeing far more routine foot care than what they
Mhm.
wanted. And they get stuck in a trap. And they
Yeah.
don't know how to just transition from that to getting more MSK. And they're slowly sort of building it up from there. So it looks like you've done it anyway.
Yeah, and it was a really small clinic, so she didn't
Mm.
have the capacity. It was just her, really. And although there were two chairs, she only ever used one of the rooms, and she had one, maybe 2 days a week to commit to it. So, of course, when I joined, we immediately opened it up 5 days a week and we started expanding and bringing in more staff. So we made it just more accessible to people as well. And that alone did a huge amount.
And the good part is, like you said, you've doubled the revenue and
Mhm.
you've bucked the trend. You haven't had a problem finding staff. Where
No,
a
I
lot of people are
haven't.
saying,
I've been really
"Oh,
lucky.
we can't find people," but you've been able to do it.
And I've been really lucky because I've got both the two new, or three actually. So we had an FHP staff who approached us and expressed an interest in working with us because she was finding things in her DOMS visits that she didn't know what to do with, and could we help her out? And she was just great. So we brought Steph on board, just working with us 1 day a week. And we've been so impressed with her that she's now gone on to the apprenticeship. She's going to do that this year and train to do her full podiatry qualification. So we've got Steph, who is the queen of organisation,
Yeah,
complements my skills beautifully. And then yeah, exactly. So, and then we've got Liz, who's a hugely experienced NHS clinician, and her specialities are things like wound care and diabetes, which again is not my skill set. And she's very experienced as a clinician in her own right. So the team fits together really well. And then a new grad as well. So whereas Liz approached us because she knew we were looking for new staff, and I completely bit her hand off, then I targeted new graduates specifically. So I can't remember what the episode numbers were, but a while back you did a series where you had a number of graduates interviewing or
yeah,
about to graduate, and what they were looking for and what the different job advert they were suspicious of, what they thought was
oh,
too good to be true. And it was really useful because based off that, I wrote quite a targeted job advert and I got loads of responses straight away. It was fantastic.
yeah. I'm actually going to look up the episode now just to remind people what it was because that was episode 310 and 311, How I Chose My Employer, and that was 2023 graduates, part one and part two.
Yeah, it was really useful.
It was a real eye opener. When I
Mm,
half of what they told me, I expected them to say, but some of them, especially when they were saying when a job offers too much money, oh, it's too good to be
mm,
true.
mm.
And also, yes, some of them did say they were really looking at the money, but they were more the mature students.
Yeah.
The ones who are younger were not really overly concerned about what I get paid. I just want to work somewhere that has a great team environment,
Yeah.
and I feel like I'm going to learn something in the first couple of years. So I thought that was really refreshing to hear.
Yeah, and interesting. The three applicants that I interviewed, that was their focus. What can you do for me in terms of training?
Yeah.
The money was not top of their list at all. So we've been really lucky. So we've got someone who just started with us a few weeks ago, and she's doing very well. So
When I graduated, money was the only focus because every single job was the same. There was nothing. There was nothing that really set businesses apart. Whereas these days, there's so much variation. And podiatry, the scope of podiatry is so much bigger now. That's why it's important to, what is it in your business that you enjoy doing more of? And then try and
mm.
find people that have that same interest. And if you can match up, makes life a lot easier.
Yeah, me too. It was a huge financial priority for me because I was a mature student. I had bills to pay.
Yeah.
I really couldn't be starting on a low salary. It just wasn't going to work. I couldn't do it. So financially, it was a priority for me. And I think, as you say, a lot of mature students, that is the case.
I totally understand it because if you're a mature age student, you've got family, you've got responsibilities. So
Mm,
the income's going to be a big part of it. But I don't know, I think there's a lot of people out there who have got businesses who probably could really benefit by bringing on a partner.
yeah,
Someone they can share
absolutely.
the workload with, but then also share the business. But don't
Mm,
make them work there for 2 or 5 years before you do it. If you find the right person, I think you should offer them to become part owners earlier rather than
mm,
later, or sooner rather than
yeah,
later. Otherwise, they'll leave.
get that interest. If you've got that vested interest in the business, I think you perform so much better. It matters to you more.
So the business you had beforehand, though, you said you had your own business outside. Was that the horse business?
Yeah, a little sole trader business as an equine podiatrist. So yeah, I mean that took a real hit over COVID because my whilst I was at uni, that was mid COVID.
Yeah.
So that was another sort of financial blow, if you like, during that period. That although I kept the business going to an extent, it wasn't supporting me in the way it had been through my first year. So things were getting a little tight. And I also taught horse riding on the side as well as I have done for many years because that's a passion of mine. I do that for fun almost.
Have you still got the same? Have you still have the business?
No, I couldn't keep everything going, too many balls to juggle at the same time. So, no, I folded that almost as I graduated. I allowed my client base to dwindle and dwindle and didn't take any new clients on the closer I got to my final exams. And then the minute I accepted my first podiatry job, I had to ring round my clients and say, I'm really sorry. I'll
It's
do
over.
2 or 3 more appointments for you, and that's it.
Okay. What about what you learned having your own business on the side? Did that help you with the running of the business that you have now, or was it completely different?
Oh, I think there is definitely some relevance there. If nothing else, people management
Oh
skills.
yeah.
Yeah, how to manage people because it's not the horses that are the problem running my business, it was the owners. So yeah, just good communication skills, how to manage people, how to manage your time and your diary and all the little things that you don't perhaps always think of. So yeah, there's definitely some crossover.
Yeah, I was talking to someone, it wasn't, they weren't in podiatry, it might have been dentistry, but they said there's been a number of students who have had businesses on the side while they've been studying.
Mm,
And then once they graduate, what they learnt at the same time in business has
yeah,
really been a plus when they graduated and worked somewhere that they're able to bring those skills with them. So
definitely.
it is,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
probably not a bad idea for students that, hey, what's something you can do on the side while you're studying, make some money?
yeah.
You don't have to just pull beers at a pub.
Yeah, so when you're looking after someone's horse, their pride and joy, you very quickly learn how to manage expectations, which is very relevant to podiatry when someone's injured and the general day-to-day running of the business as well.
So I've got another horse question while it's on my mind.
Go.
What was it you did most of the time? Was it trimming the hoofs a certain way?
Yeah, exactly. So you're trimming hooves. A lot of horses suffer from metabolic issues that causes havoc on the hooves.
Okay.
It's a little bit comparable to diabetes in a way. So yeah, their hooves get misshapen and deformed and it causes lameness. So a lot of what I was doing was not just the physical trimming of the hoof, but it was managing the diet and the management of the horse and the exercise of the horse, almost from a rehab point of view. Because unless you address everything, much like people,
Yeah.
unless you address the whole thing, you're never going to get that hoof right.
Okay. So did you take the shoe off, do what you had to do and put the shoe back on, or would you get the farrier to then do that?
Right. So one of the big premises of equine podiatry is there's no shoes.
No
Because,
shoes.
no shoes. So a hoof is a dynamic structure. It flexes with pressure and load. So if you nail it to a fixed shoe, it can't function properly. And over time, all the soft tissues, the cartilages in the hoof capsule, they just atrophy. And then you've got no support. One of the biggest problems I see in horses is stress fractures. If you've got no cartilages to absorb concussion with a ton of animal that's going flat out and jumping, it doesn't take long to get a stress fracture. So yeah, shoes are out of there, and then it's a case of rehabilitating the hoof and developing it back to how nature intended it to be, functioning how it should be, and then you're away. So yeah, I've had my own horses competing without shoes in all sorts of different disciplines. They've all done really well. So yeah, shoes were developed for the military, so you could charge another army without getting, do you know what I mean by caltrops, the spikes?
Yeah.
Spiky things, yeah. So that's why shoes started, because they used to scatter the battlefields with caltrops to try and disable the cavalry. So they started nailing metal to horses' feet to offset that, and that's how it started.
If people do not get an education on this podcast, I tell you, that's me. Like sometimes I feel really selfish that I learn so much when I'm interviewing different people, and that's why usually once a month or about once every 5 or 6 episodes, I bring someone on who's not a podiatrist. Because usually they've got a skill set in some area that I find really interesting. And I'm thinking, well, if I find it interesting and I think that can actually help podiatrists, then I want to bring them on the show.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I used to have a great picture of an x-ray with a deformed horse hoof that had been nailed into a shoe, and a sort of an x-ray, side on x-ray, a woman in a stiletto heel. Like, it's the same thing. You force your foot into that position, this is what's going to happen.
Okay, so a racehorse, for example, they have shoes on all the time, don't they?
Some of them do. There are a few race yards that are actually looking at barefoot. My own horse is an ex-race horse. I've just taken her off the track. And yeah, first thing we did was take her shoes off. And over the last few months, her feet have improved so much. And just her overall muscle has improved so much because she's starting to move properly again.
That's interesting. That's really interesting, actually.
Race horses all go left. They go round left. They don't turn right.
In Australia, they go right.
Which way around the track they go?
Well, hang on, I'm trying to think now. I'm thinking of different horse races. So, your Melbourne Cup, yes, they go left to right, but in some other tracks they go right to left.
I guess some of them do, but mostly in training, everything's you're curving around to the left.
Oh, right, okay.
Well, that's what I found, that she's been really skewed to that side, and that's my theory, that she's just predominantly worked on one direction.
Yeah, well, it was one of the things I always said I wanted to own a racehorse. So, a while ago, maybe a decade and a bit ago, I convinced my wife, let's buy a racehorse. So we did.
Did you talk her into that?
It was one of those things you just said, well, you don't.
It's a great idea.
You don't waste money on sports cars and all that type of thing. So she said, okay, you can indulge in a racehorse. So went parts with some other people who bought a racehorse. They're expensive. And it broke down in the first race. Like, it was doing really well. It was leading. Those. We were talking to the trainer, and it's come around the turn, and it's miles in front. Just slow down, dude. You're going to win. But it just kept going, and then boom, just before it got to the finish line, blew something and ended up coming third and never ran again.
Yeah. See, my mare, she went through race training, but she never actually raced because she was rubbish. She's got zero killer instinct. Just going after you. It's fine. Yeah, she's just rubbish. She's a lovely horse, but she's never going to race.
Yeah. So that was the only racehorse I've ever had. And my wife said, "Okay, you happy now? You've got that out of your system." And I said, "Yeah, let's not do that again." And it's not that
that's an expensive mistake.
And it's not that I go to the races or I gamble. I don't do any of that. But I don't know, it was just something I wanted to do.
No, it wasn't. Racing's really not my thing either, but
No.
this particular horse came up and I just really liked her character. I'd had my previous horse for 20 odd years and I'd lost him, and then I just felt really lost because horses are my outlet. That's what I do just to chill. It doesn't matter whether I'm riding or I just wander up the field, give it a pet and a polo and off we go. Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you a few more questions before we just
Off
about
track.
time. Yeah, no, oh, way off track. That's okay. That's how the podcast rolls. So with you've expanded, opening up a third clinic, you've got a number of staff there now. Is this your
Mhm.
plan is to keep growing and keep getting bigger, or is it to consolidate what you've got and just get better before bigger?
Yeah, yes and no. So we have now reached the point where we've reached the limits of the practice premises. So we can't get any bigger in terms of adding an extra room.
Yeah,
So, but to be honest, we're still quite a young business, and I think a period of sort of consolidation is definitely in order. We've got staff going through the apprenticeship. I've got a new graduate, and I think probably it's best for me to put my energy into getting the team just working really well together before we go any further. But I have other plans in the wings, things I want to train to do, new equipment that I'd like to train in, invest in, and take the business forward in that sort of sense. So there are plans, but certainly not expanding the premises anytime soon. And if we do, it'll either be a case of a second premises or
yeah.
moving to an entirely different one because we've reached the physical limits of the building now. So
Yeah, can I just ask you a question? I've heard it mentioned a few times in the UK when they're talking about podiatry apprenticeships. What is that?
Mm. So whereas when I did my degree, you
Yeah,
attend full time as a student, and
yeah,
we had basically it's like a teaching hospital, so you were in a few hours every week. The apprenticeship works a little bit differently. So they do most of the lectures are delivered online, which makes it accessible pretty much from anywhere.
yeah.
And so Steph will be with us. Let me think. She'll be with us Monday, Tuesday, Friday, and then she's in lectures the other 2 days. So the university covers more of the sort of theory side of stuff, and in terms of training in the clinical skills, that's down to us. So yeah, mentorship, that's another whole new ball game for me.
Okay, so that's a different pathway to become a podiatrist. You actually can do it as an
Yes.
apprenticeship in the UK. So you're hands-on learning, like as a foot health practitioner,
From day one. Yes, absolutely.
and
And she's got her own caseload.
and you're studying at the same time. And then how many
Mhm.
years is that for?
So Steph has a previous degree, so she's gone in to do the master's pre-reg, so she'll be through in 2 very intense years.
Yeah,
But yeah, Steph's like me, she's mature, she's in her 40s, she's got a family. It's not a viable option for her to stop work for 3 years and go to university in the typical way. So the apprenticeship makes it far more accessible to her. And for us as a business, she's already been working with us for a year as an FHP. She has her own caseload. She's very popular. She's booked out for weeks. So I feel really confident that we can fill her diary, and effectively she's paying for herself and
mm,
then some. So we've got all the advantages of having a really useful member of staff, and we can offer her the opportunity to progress on and do her podiatry degree. So it's win both ways.
So how long have the apprenticeships been going for in the UK? Because I've heard it mentioned about the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, yeah, quite a while. I know that there's different ways of doing it as well. So one of the ladies in my year group, she was doing the apprenticeship, but she was doing it via the NHS. So she worked in an NHS role, and they were supporting her apprenticeship. But you can definitely do it via private practice as well. So I think it's been going for a few years now.
Okay, so you can either get, so in the UK, you can go to university or you can do an apprenticeship. And at the end of it
Yep,
all, you both graduate exactly the same as a podiatrist.
yep, absolutely. Yep.
And nobody looks at the other one as being better, a better way to do it, or what's the
I don't
feedback in the
think so.
UK been about it?
I don't think so. No, for me, perhaps I would lean in favour of the apprenticeship from my experience with Steph, because skills. She's not even started effectively her first year yet, and she's as I say, she's got her own caseload. She's already doing a lot of the sort of general podiatry for us anyway, because she can and she's very good at it. So there's no waiting around for her to be a useful member of the team while she learns
Yeah.
the ropes. She already is. So that has huge advantages to us, and she's even throughout her studies, she's a valuable team member as well.
So
It's
are
not
there
like
many
she has
people
to.
that do the apprenticeship? So are they becoming foot health practitioners first, then doing the apprenticeship, or people are just
I
going,
think they
I want to be
probably
a
are. Yeah.
podiatrist? And so somebody could work at your clinic, for example,
Yep.
and be working as a receptionist for 2 years and go, hey, I'm really enjoying this. I want to go down the apprenticeship route instead of going to university.
Absolutely. No, you know them. They're a
Yeah.
known quantity. You know what they're like as an employee. Whereas if you bring in a brand new shiny graduate, you don't actually know what they're like. You'll
Okay.
find out really fast, but you've got no track record with them.
Yeah.
Whereas she's been with us a year. I know what her work ethic's like. I know what her personality's like, and I am very pleased to hang on to her.
That's interesting. Well, we don't have that in Australia.
Do you not?
No. no, not at
Well,
all.
they're missing a trick.
It's one of those things I have said, because they always talk about there being a shortage of podiatrists. And,
Mm.
and I argue sometimes, is there a shortage of podiatrists or is there an abundance of crap jobs? Crap jobs might be a harsh way of putting it. But is there an overabundance of average jobs?
Mm.
So all of a sudden these graduates will come out and there's so many average jobs on offer, not a lot of good jobs. And sometimes the good jobs are being missed. So everyone's then sitting
Yeah,
on the sideline trying to find
I
someone.
think that.
And I ran an idea past a few people that I know. I said, what about if podiatry in Australia is 4 years? What about
Mm.
in the first 2 years, you learn a whole pile of stuff, but at the end of 2 years, you can actually leave and you're a podiatry assistant. But if you want to then continue on and do the biomechanics and the orthotics and the more detailed stuff, you do the next 2 years and you become a podiatrist.
Yep.
And therefore, if all of a sudden there's a shortage and they go, well, let's push a whole pile of people through who only want to do the first 2 years and not interested in the other part. Maybe that's how we could find people.
Yeah, I think the more accessible you make it, the more people you're going to get on board with the profession as well. And following on from your comment about the, how should we say, less than optimum jobs available,
Yeah.
I think the vast majority of graduates that I know who have completed their studies in the UK are very much heading into private practice because they feel somewhat limited by what the NHS can offer, which is such a shame. And there's a lot of misconceptions about the opportunities that you get in the NHS, the opportunities you get in private practice. And I think perhaps if we got people out there working, they'd have a more realistic idea of what you can do in both worlds, because there are some disadvantages both ways, but they both have plenty to offer.
Yeah, I've heard some people in private practice who have said they're so glad they're in the NHS for a period of time, help them hone
Mm-hmm.
their skills in certain areas.
Yep.
And I know other people have said, yeah, but then some people stay there too long because they work their way up the ladder and all of a sudden they get like a title and then they
Yeah.
never want to leave because they get to actually hang on to that title and they can use that title when they're talking to people and say, oh, do you know that I'm this position in the NHS? And
Mm.
for some people, that's actually really important.
Yeah. Or they get stuck because there's
Yeah.
no opening available in the next band up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the
There's no
thing.
opportunity to progress, and it's not a lack of skill or a lack of ambition. There's just no opportunity to them. A friend of mine's sort of in that similar situation, and she's getting quite frustrated. And it's such a shame because she's very talented.
It must be hard. It's because someone was telling me that when you go through the UK, the mentality is a lot of you will go and work in the NHS for a while,
Mm-hmm.
then move into private practice. But you're saying more new graduates are going, you know what, we can go straight into private practice.
Yeah, very much so. I think certainly
That's
a
good.
big chunk going straight into private practice because the perception is that there's more to offer. There's more diversity, and it's easier for you to climb the ladder, as it were.
Mm. Yeah, well, in Australia, it's pretty much, I think nearly everybody that goes through 90% straight into private practice.
Yeah, yeah. I
And
think we're
only
probably
a
heading in that.
percentage go into community health,
Yeah.
hospital work, government work.
Yeah, I think COVID unfortunately hit the NHS quite hard in that respect because they were so overwhelmed, so under-resourced, and just it got very stressful. And I think a lot of students who went through their studies during that period have this idea of the NHS just being a fairly brutal place to work, which is a
Mm.
real shame because it does have a lot to offer.
Oh, I'm
But
sure it
yeah.
does. I have friends who have been in NHS for years. I've met
Mhm.
through social media and have met them in person, and they love working there. They love working
Yep.
there. They find it
Yep.
really rewarding. And they're good podiatrists, so it's not a place you should avoid. But I think it's you got to work out what works best for you.
Hmm.
So I want to finish
Definitely.
on a high note here. This is
Yes.
because I think it's always good to finish a podcast strong. But you did mention that you found the Podiatry Legends podcast and the Podiatry Marketing podcast, if people aren't checking it out, that you got a lot of information for that has actually helped you as a
Huge.
podiatrist and as a business owner.
Yeah, so I started listening to your podcast when I was a student, and I still do. Most days I've got one of the podcasts going on at least on my commute to work, and it's like getting a little. If you just get one little gem, and most
Mm,
podcasts you'll get at least one little gem to take away with you, and if you action that, doesn't matter whether you do it straight away or whether you make a plan to do it at a later date. Almost by default over time, that cumulative effect has grown my business without a doubt. It's like those little gems all add up, and you make all those slow changes. And for me, it's made it so much more accessible and so much less daunting as a wobbly new graduate just going into a new job, and a new business owner doing something that I've never done before, to be able to lean on this huge collective of expertise, this wealth of knowledge, and take a little nugget from here and a little nugget from there. It's like having this huge amount of mentorship on my commute to work. It's been great. So a huge thanks to all your guests, because I don't know they've done it, but they've helped me grow my business.
I know. I tell people that an episode I did just a little while ago, Funmi. Do you know Funmi?
Yeah, I listened to that one. Yeah.
Her episode was fantastic. And
Yes.
I remember when I asked her to come on, she was like, said that she was pretty much the same as you. Oh, I don't know. But when I said to her, come on, and she did. And when we finished it, I just went, I know, I guarantee everybody that listens to it will take something away from it and go, yeah, I can relate to that. Or, yeah, I think that would be really helpful. Because sometimes you can have someone like, say, Howard Dadenberg on. As soon as people see his name, they all want to listen to it.
Yeah. I think there's an overriding theme is that it's a mindset. It's one of your very early podcasts with Jonathan Small, when he talks so much about being in the right mindset. And as a collective, the podcasts are all passionate people who love what they do and has so much knowledge and experience to bring to you. If you take that on, it's coming back to that, the sum of the 5 people around most, well, what I listen to every day on my commute to work is this wealth of expertise.
Yeah, and you'll know that, and there's probably some names that people know in podiatry have not been on the podcast yet. And and that's why this show will go for years and years, because there's so many podiatrists out there who've got great stories like yourself, like Funmi as well, that I know will be helpful for people. Yeah. There's other people just doing some amazing things in the profession that I want to put the spotlight on. I want people to know who they are and what they're actually doing. So yeah, we'll be around for a few years.
And it's not just the really experienced clinicians or business owners that have something to offer. I got a huge amount out of the soon-to-be graduates that you interviewed. Lots of quite a diverse amount of people that have great things to offer.
The best episodes are always the ones when I ask people to come on and they go, "Oh, everyone who hesitates. Oh, I don't know. I'm not a podiatry legend, so I have to find you a hat. I have to get you a Podiatry Legends hat."
Yeah, I'm very easily motivated. A hat, I'm sold.
That's how this all started, because I had a post and it had the photo of Podiatry Legends hat. And I said, if you want to know how to get one, send me an email. And you sent me an email. Yeah. I said, I want a hat.
Yeah, really, I did.
You did. And I said, well, if you want a hat,
you have to cut the t-shirts as well with Big Jim Mac.
Oh, Big Jim Mac.
You've been muttering about that for a long time.
3 years or something we've been talking about the Big Jim Mac t-shirts. And yeah, I think we will do that. Yeah, have Big Jim Mac.
Marketing ones are really, really useful.
And I'll have with
to me,
Tyson.
When I started, marketing was just like, you do an advert and you put it in your local paper. That's marketing, right?
Yeah. And
then I started listening to it. I was a bit more to it than that, isn't there? Okay. Yeah. So everything I do, every contact I have with a patient or anybody else, that's marketing. And suddenly it all started to fall together.
Well, that's the thing. By the time people listen to this episode, the Podiatry Marketing Podcast, go to podiatry.marketing and you'll find it, will be about episode 150 on that one by the time this one comes out. And it is, and every week we just come up with something different. But there's so many things you can talk about. And sometimes it's not always just marketing related. We might talk slightly a bit more business related or communication related. But everything you do is marketing. Everything. Yeah. You being on here now is marketing for your podiatry business.
Absolutely. And I thought it would be such a dry podcast when I first started listening. It's like, oh God, marketing, really? Gosh, I know. Something more interesting to talk about. But it's not. It's funny as well. So
yeah, I give Jim a lot of shit, don't I?
I know.
You should see the parts I have to edit out where I'll say something and Jim just looks at me, just shaking his head. And I deliberately say things to just try and make him laugh all the time. So it's good. Okay, Natalie, this has been fun. I have really enjoyed this. And when the next batch of Podiatry Legends hats get done, the one will be headed your way, all the way to the UK. So I want to thank you for coming on. Thanks for connecting me with Jo as well. Like I said, she'll be on a future episode.
It's going to be great.
And so thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.